You will now be placed into the conference. You are now muted. This conference is now being recorded.
Good afternoon, good evening, good night. We have people from 61 countries calling in to learn today. Witness the awesome connectivity of our global insights community and the universal thirst for knowledge and growth. I hope my colleague, Dr. Dan Young, and I keep things interesting enough to maintain your precious attention all the way to Australia. Today, Innovator Die is our theme, and I'd like to begin with a story. In its early years, the Minnesota mining and manufacturing company, now known as 3M, was a dismal failure. After years of mining losses and red ink, company founders and investors came to a crossroads. They could close the business or change course. The 3M execs did what most successful do when faced with failure. They used it as an opportunity to innovate and find a path to success. And we all are sure glad that they did, because today the company generates over $30 billion in revenue and sells over 55,000 products around the world. As we get going with our webinar, please send questions in. Hopefully we can get to them, and if not, we're happy to follow up with you later on. Start with this slide from Ray Pointer, who, believe it or not, is one of the most followed individuals in all of marketing research. His recent proclaimment was that 40 to 60% of existing research shops will soon disappear. So I hope what we talk about today can help you avoid that. I'm Shane. I'm on the left there, and soon I'll be joined with someone much more interesting than I, and that's Dr. Dan Young, who was at P&G for 30 years, winner of the Global Research Innovation Award, and just an all-around really great guy that knows everything I think there is to know about behavioral science. So Hotspex, some of you might be wondering where the name came from. The quick story is back when I founded the company 17 years ago with a couple colleagues out of business school, we were struggling to find domain names, and all we really wanted to do was to bring new ideas to great brands for their hot new specifications. And that's where Hotspex came from. A lot of people think it came from somewhere else. I know what you're thinking, but the truth is what I just actually said. So right now we're working with 15 of the top 20 global advertisers in 31 countries around the world, which is going to give the talk that we're about to give some substance, because we get to see everything that's going on at these different companies. And so you might be wondering why we're about to spill all our secrets, and we're really inspired by the work that we do with Google. They're a great partner and client of ours. You might not know this, but they've released over 900 million lines of code to the world for free. In fact, there are businesses out there that wouldn't even exist. That wouldn't even exist if Google hadn't actually done that. We love their business, and we love the idea of this entire industry growing and learning more and more and more. So everything that we're actually going to do here today, you're going to actually learn something that can actually help make a difference in your life and career. So the agenda, the first thing we're going to talk about is how the world has changed. Then we're going to get into some insights and learning that we're going to share, and then Dan Young is going to talk to you about the implicit notion. This is a huge focal point for a lot of our clients these days, and we just thought it would be great for Dan to shed some light on what is implicit, what isn't implicit, and some things to consider if you're a vendor or a buyer about how to make better decisions in that area. So as you might have guessed already, this is not going to be a sales pitch at all. If you're looking for product demos and insights about how methodologies work, we're not going to cover any of that. This is purely designed to give you inspiration so that you can become an insights innovator. So back to rapid change that we're all faced with. This is from a few years ago, but it's still very true and relevant. It's that a lot of the S&P 500 is going to be replaced by the year 2020. Used to be that companies stayed on there for half a century, but now the tenure of an S&P 500 membership is only about 15 years long. So companies like Blockbuster are gone. And the reason why is because the world is changing quickly. This is Shanghai in 1987 at the top, and Shanghai in just 2010 at the bottom. Here's a 5 megabyte computer in the year 1956. It's larger than several refrigerators. And to think about the computing power that's in an iPhone or a watch or an alarm clock now, it's just incredible what we've been able to achieve in under a century. Computing power is actually what's driving a lot of this change. Here's a very complicated eye popper of a chart that you can see later on the recorded webinar. But basically what I'm trying to make the point here is that just by the year 2020, computers will have faster processing power and be smarter than us. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to outthink us and we're all going to be out of work, but it does mean that there's going to be a lot of change coming and certain things are going to get automated. So what does the future hold? I thought it was important to talk about 3G Capital. We're very lucky that we work with 3 of the different brands that they own, Anheuser-Busch, Kraft, and Tim Hortons. They're a wonderful company. They came out of Brazil. You might have heard recently they almost actually went and bought Unilever, which is incredible that Kraft and Heinz could have bought a company that was much bigger than it. The reason why they do that, I'll get into in a minute, but their key fundamental strategy is to do something called zero-based budgeting. What zero-based budgeting does, essentially, I'm sure a bunch of you on the phone are familiar with this, but it's a process whereby rather than working from your last year's budget for a track ad campaign or a distribution network from zero, i.e. zero-based budgeting. And when they come in and they do that, magical things happen. If you're interested in reading more about that, I wrote a pretty long article on LinkedIn here that you can read. So if you add me to LinkedIn, I'd be happy to share it with you. Here are some examples. So from The Economist, you can see Anheuser-Busch InBev here. This is before 3G took over. You can see that once they bought it in 2008, the profit margin spiked as much as 50%, and now it's the industry-leading profit margin. And so what happens in another company, this is actually Burger King. I mean, look at this. So about 20% profit margin. Since 3G takes over, it goes up to about 65%. And it's just incredible that they're able to do this and drive so much profit. Again, same with Heinz here. Here's Kraft and Heinz operating 30%, way outbeating the competition. So all that means is that once they squeeze all the costs out of an organization, that they start looking for other things to consume so they can squeeze those costs out and just continue to actually grow their shareholder value. For example, when they bought Heinz in 2013, they closed 6 factories, cut 7,000 jobs in 18 months, and operating margins jumped from 18 to 26%. It's just incredible. So the implication, as McKinsey says here, is that everyone's talking about zero-based budgeting, because if you don't talk about zero-based budgeting, specifically on quarterly conference calls, bad things happen. If big companies are sleeping, activist investors like George Soros will come in and actually start to take board seats and start to make changes in the organization to squeeze out incremental profit, much to their massive profit increase. That said, I had dinner with a Kraft Insights leader, a very senior Kraft person, last week, and she told me, yeah, it was brutal when they got here, but wow, we just had the best business plan that we've ever had. So the things that they're doing work, and I think we all must pay attention as insight professionals to know that budgets will always be getting crushed, and that we need to do better with less and be faster and cheaper. So now I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in digital. So digital is bringing massive change to our industry. Think about film back in about the year 1991, and then look at the demand fall off. Then enter Instagram and Kodak. Think about what happened here. Kodak at its peak had 60,000 employees, and it went bankrupt. Instagram, on the other hand, with just 13 employees, disrupted the entire photography business and actually got bought by Facebook for $1 billion. Now talking about Walmart. So look at how long Walmart in 17 years to get to $80 billion. It took 17 years Amazon took 17 years to get to $80 billion, and Walmart took 17 to get to 8. So it's 10 times more efficient with digital. You also might have read recently that Warren Buffett, largely regarded as a good oracle to the future, recently dumped his Walmart shares. In fact, last week, and he basically said that Amazon was going to pose a very significant threat. So what's going on in marketing, and what does this all mean to us? I'd like to thank Scott Galloway, who gave this fantastic talk at Cannes, about the depth of the industrial advertising complex. For the next few slides that you're going to see, you can go on YouTube and see it sometime. I highly recommend it. So what's going on with affluence and favorite brands? The fact is, in the U.S. and all around the world, people have less favorite brands. You can find brands in new ways, like e-commerce and like the long tail. You don't need to see TV ads the way we used to. And speaking of TV, look what's going on with viewership over just 2014 to 2015. Massive drops in viewership. I mean, look at these. A quarter of their viewers went away. And where are they going? They're going into Netflix, Amazon, and Hulu. So look at what's happened with the cable companies over these quarters. They've had a decrease of about 1%, but the massive increase that's coming has been through these new online services, and I'll talk a little bit about later, but Google also has launched a television station. You can basically get a subscription for $35 a month with 10 major networks on it. So TV's changed, and as a result, advertising's changed, and some brands are feeling it. big CPG brands in the U.S. that heavily relied on TV to actually get their message out. 90% lost share in the end of 2015, and 68% had a decline in sales. Very, very significant. As I was saying before, YouTube has this new subscription service. It's $35 a month. There's going to be 40 channels on it, and they are going to power all of the advertising that works on YouTube with their massive, amazing advertising engine. So look what's going on here with you've got digital and mobile in the last few years really coming in and started eating the share. Mostly newspapers felt most of the brunt in there. Apologize that my drawing isn't too awesome there, but I think you get the point. And you can see TV's been largely untouched, but based on what I just said, that's all going to change. So there's been massive, massive growth in digital. And so as insights professionals, we need to be helping brands understand how to grow through new mediums, more specifically digital. But who's going to win, you ask? So of all the growth that came, look at Google and Facebook. They enjoyed the largest part of this growth. So almost 90% of it, and the other 10% were actually made up with a plethora of different small ad tech companies, which you might have heard are in deep trouble these days. All the unicorn ad tech companies, many are going broke, many are having founders retire, and our clients are saying, the war is over. It's all about Google and Facebook, and that's where all of their focus is moving forward. So these are big companies. You put Google and Facebook together, they've got almost $1 trillion in market capitalization versus the big holding companies that take care of a lot of the advertising for all of the brands that we service and with some that many of us actually work for. So these are just huge, huge powerhouses that are actually inflecting major, major change in the world and how we communicate and in how actually we grow brands. I want to shift my focus now to AI. AI, of course, is artificial intelligence. It can mean many, many different things to many people, but there's a few interesting use cases and some that are very relevant to what we do day in, day out in Insights. I think a watershed moment that happened in the field of AI was when Watson, which was made by IBM, beat the Jeopardy champions. And it didn't just beat them, it dominated them, as you can see by the actual winnings that they both have here. They made a very smart computer that they call Watson. They used to be a deep learning algorithm, and then they branded it and call it Watson. Now they've deployed it in many, many interesting ways, and at the end of my presentation, if you hang around for it, I'll show you how you too, no matter what you're doing, could potentially start using Watson in a very easy, interesting way at very little cost and with no real expertise. So think about what AI does. It gathers data, analyzes data, interprets the results, and determines a recommended course of action, and then implements it. If you consider this for a minute, that is largely what we all do for a profession. So, these computers can start to do what we do. I'll call out ZappyStore right now as one of the most innovative companies I know in the business. I know they're starting to deploy artificial intelligence to look at lots of past reports and start to understand what conclusions humans made with those reports, to use machine learning to not need the humans to make conclusions in future reports. So simple stuff is going to be very easy for AI to get in and start to automate. But it's not just going to be our profession, it's lots of professions. So here's the Economist catalog of fears with the probability of computerization of different occupations. So good news for recreational therapists. Those are people that need to touch you. For now, they're safe because Watson doesn't have hands yet. Neither does Watson able to do dental work on you because, again, no hands. But who knows when this will come. Look down towards the bottom, though. Telemarketers, accountants and auditors, salespeople, and technical writers. You can see that those jobs are seriously at risk from being automated. So the question I ask you is, where do we all fit in? And if you were to ask me, I think it's somewhere in the middle there. So I think we need to pay attention to this. Another prediction from our friends at SMR, 30% of jobs in research will be eliminated in 7 years. They made this prediction 2.5 years ago, and you can already feel that some of this stuff is starting to happen. Back to Ray Pointer, he's saying 40 to 60% of the jobs are going to be gone. Now, this has happened before. Here's travel agents at the peak with 112,000 in the U.S. down to less than half that number about a decade later because you've got companies like Expedia and Travelocity that come out and automate a lot of that process where you don't need people in the middle. In fact, those computers and AIs do a better job of that process of understanding all the different booking options and presenting options back to buyers in real time better than any human could. So it doesn't sound great, but the good news is that there is an opportunity here, and we're very lucky to do a lot of work in Asia. And there's an Asian word called crisis that is basically these two ideas. Thankfully, it's not the same in English, but one component of it is that it's crisis is danger, but the other component is actually it's an opportunity. So where there is danger, there is an opportunity. And so to inspire you a little bit, I'll talk to you about the weaving looms for a minute. When these came out, workers were freaking out. They were worried about their jobs. You had Luddites throwing stuff into machines to break them. And in fact, it actually took 98% of the work away from humans. And output increased 50 times. So what happened? Because we all know it ended well, and it did. Demand for cloth soared. In fact, over the next few decades, there were 400% more jobs in the textiles industry than there were before these machines were invented. Another great example is ATMs. You can imagine bank tellers were quaking in their boots about what they were going to do, and sure enough, banks needed about 22% less tellers in their physical organizations and in their retail branch footprint to actually service their clients. But the good news was it changed their cost model in a way that they were able to open up 43% more branches, and actually employment within banking increased after the technology disruption. Here's a very busy chart that basically highlights this key thing that I want to show you. Let me just get my little marker out here again. And this is based on 45 cross-sector CEOs asking what was important to them. Here they are down here, 45 cross-sector CEOs. I just crossed it out. Way to go, Shane. And you can see, amazingly, they feel that customer insight is the #1 most important thing for them to actually have competitive growth over their competitors, which is amazing. And so I want to plant this seed within you that the idea is that you must innovate or die, and it's true in every industry. And I hope what we're about to show you in terms of some tips and tricks can inspire you and give you some confidence to actually go out, make some changes, take down the machines, just like happened in the Terminator. Quick commercial break. Here's a small optical illusion. Guess which line is longer? If you'd like the answer for this, please email me. I'm happy to share it with you, although I'm hoping the large majority of you have already come to the conclusion that I'll tell you in email if you email me. So I want you to consider for a minute before we show you how to innovate or what our advice is. Everybody in life, it doesn't matter whether they work in textiles, banking, they're an insights buyer, they're an insights supplier, we're all playing the game of life. We're all trying to get promoted. We're all trying to get ahead. And the way you get ahead and get promoted is by being different, by sticking out, by being distinctive. And a great way to do that is by being innovative and by being seen as someone that's driving change within an organization, bringing in new methods that save time and money and lead to deeper human insights that grow brands. That's why I would implore you not to sit still and do things the way you've always done them, because those are the companies like Kodak that go bankrupt. Be like 3M and see that there are new ways and new pathways to actually grow. So here comes some hot tips that, again, I hope are going to inspire you to be an innovator. Now, in terms of an idea, it's hard to design a process to come up with an idea. So you're going to see some tips in here, and I know we talked about 5 in the invite. You got 3 or 4 bonus tips coming at you, and these tips are really meant to inspire you. There's no actual step-by-step guide on how to be innovative, but hopefully some of what you're about to hear will inspire you in terms of how to be a better innovator. The one thing that I want to start with is to learn and leverage the laws of growth and incorporate them into your new methods. If you haven't seen these books yet, I think well, I'm sure many of you have seen them. If you haven't, they will come across your desk in the relatively near future. Came out of Australia. Byron Sharp wrote them, and I've seen this rip through all the global clients in a way that I don't think I've seen any other philosophy in my 17 years, and neither have my mentors. Concepts in it are things like this, where you've got frequency and penetration. It talks about to grow a brand, you've got to create penetration. So up here, you have brands that grew penetration and grew frequency. Here you have brands that grew frequency but had decreasing penetration. You can see most of those brands declined. Here you have brands that grew penetration but had decreasing frequency of use, and those brands grew. So Byron has come up with these wonderful laws that talk about how you truly grow a brand. And I would recommend you incorporate this into as you think about methods, because this is becoming the modern gestalt of how you actually grow brands and how marketing should truly work. Another interesting thing in the book is that light buyers accounts for large sales. Thinking about soft drinks, I know Coke's global volume, I think 54% of it is made up of people that buy just one Coke a year. So the idea that you should focus on heavy users and try to defend these heavy users against competitive steal and reward them with loyalty programs and discounts and things is false. It is not a way you grow a brand. You must pay high attention to light users and create physical availability so that when they want to buy you, they can. Have a look at all these companies that have adopted this methodology into their brand planning and the way they think about growing brands. Quite a long list, as you can see. I'll boil it down for you, and then I've got a surprise. Basically, the model is this. In order to create growth, you've got to create penetration. You can do this through these two key aspects of availability. One is mental availability. The other is physical availability. Physical availability is be there to be bought when people want to buy you. At shelf, have more facings, have more shopper marketing. Be available and in people's face when they're in the moment to make that purchase decision. Mental availability is being top of mind. I want a soda drink. I think Coca-Cola, top of mind. The ability for a brand to occupy that first spot in the mind is key to growth, profitability, and overall success. That's why you're going to hear from Dan in a minute, why it's important to actually consider cognitive science, because this is how you grow a brand. We're all trying to create mental availability for products and services, because the better the mental ability we have, the clearer the picture we have of what that brand is and what it can do for us, the more easy it is for us to buy. And then this one notion in the middle here is this notion of being distinct. And what that really means is about distinctive assets. The best example I have for that is actually, you think about Apple headphones when they came out. They were white. Sony, Toshiba, Panasonic headphones were all black. In fact, every other headphone brand was black. The moment you saw someone wearing white headphones, that was distinct. That was not just different like the black ones. It was completely distinct. It jumped out at you, and it made sense. They did an ad campaign around it. And all powerful brands have these sets of distinctive assets that they leverage through all their communications and packaging in order to build that mental availability. So the good news is, if you don't want to read the book, or if you have read the book and you want a refresher, if you add me to LinkedIn, I will send you a copy of this. Or if you email me, I'll send you a copy of it. I think it's important that you have a copy. The next thing I want to talk about is the importance of making a plan as you're trying to create innovation that you want to roll out. And I'd like to thank Tiffany Yokis, formerly of Mondelez, for having a conversation with me about exactly that. And that's the notion of when you create an innovation, it's really important to actually roll it out with a plan. There should be learning, there should be training, and as you are introducing new innovation into a company like a new method, it's good, and this is Tiffany's words, make sure that methods are familiar with a twist. So you think about French's, when you Google familiar with a twist, they like to talk about comfort foods with a twist. Things like premium burgers, premium mac cheese. It's familiar because you've always had it before, but it's a twist. There's something a little bit different. Again, this is why Zappy Store is so exciting. If you haven't heard of it, essentially what they are doing is they are creating a platform where tried and true methodologies like a Millward-Brown link test can exist in a cheap, fast, automated format. It doesn't have all the consulting wrapped around it, but it's familiar because you know what a Millward-Brown link test is, or you know what other tests they actually have there on. And so it's very easy for people to adopt those methodologies because they're familiar with a twist. The next point, and I'm sure all of you are wired into this because you're attending this webinar and you follow Green Book clearly, but to pay attention to the future. And I'll just call out Lenny Murphy very specifically right now. He's the guy. If you follow one person and want to have a very good perspective on what's going to happen and what's going on, Lenny's the guy. He knows all. We are very, very lucky as an industry to have him with us, to have him report the way he does, and to have him reveal the future in a way that allows us to understand the changes that are coming and what we should all do about it. On that note, there's a survey coming out soon called the Future, Look into the Future of the Market Research Industry, the GRIT Survey. I hope you'll participate in it because Lenny uses that data to make his predictions and help us all understand what's going to happen. So you should look for that to come into your inbox in the next few weeks, I think. I hope you participate. They also share back results a little bit early with you as well, too, if you take it early. The next point I want to make is to sharpen your mental axe, which you're all here doing today, trying to learn some new things. And so I love this quote from Lincoln, that he wouldn't be spending a lot of time cutting down the tree. He'd be spending most of the time sharpening the axe. Here's a great example of someone who's all about sharpening the axe. This is David Soderbergh. Formerly, he was very senior at Pepsi. He's now at a healthcare company. Amazing guy. And I saw him in New York when he was still at Pepsi probably about a year ago. And I said, what's going on, man? What are you excited about? And he says, I'm learning Python. And I said, you're learning Python? That's a big data analytical package that basically allows big data to move through pipes around organizations. And he said, yeah. And I said, are you going to become a programmer? He said, no, but I want to understand how it works, because I believe the future of insights is very much going to leverage technologies like this that we're all using, or having people working for us that are using them to help us get better insights. And so I said, well, how are you learning that? And he said, it's easy. I'm just taking it on Coursera. If you've not heard of Coursera, it's basically a massive online learning platform where some of the very best professors in the world are sharing their knowledge and learnings for free. Again, back to Google and openness. A lot of the world's knowledge is going to be shared for free. What's going to get interesting is what you do with it and how you use it. I also want to talk about Thinking Fast and Slow. Probably one of the most important books in human behavior, if not the most important book ever, written by a guy named Daniel Kahneman, who as a psychologist won a Nobel Prize in economics. I think it was the first time ever that somebody won a cross-discipline Nobel Prize. And he won the Nobel Prize because he basically proved that we all humans are irrational. Now, many of you probably have this book. If statistics hold true, less than 2% of you have actually finished it. It's a very heavy read. It's very complicated. I often, when I was reading it at night, thought the pencil on the cover was trying to implicitly tell me to stick a pencil through my eye to put myself out of my misery, and then I would go back reading more pages. And I admit I did not get all the way through because I found a way to get some notes about it. But it's on my bucket list to finish that book. That said, I've got good news for everybody. There's a new book out by Michael Lewis about that book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Now, Michael Lewis, this guy knows how to write a book that you don't want to poke your eyes out while you're reading. And I mean no disrespect to Daniel Kahneman about his book. It was very important it was written the way it was written, because giants will stand on the shoulder of his giantness because of all the learning and teaching in there. Michael Lewis, I'm halfway through this book right now, and I will say it's one of the books that I'm actually dreading finishing it, that I'm enjoying it so much. He did other great books that have now made motion pictures, like The Big Short, Moneyball, Liar's Poker, and The Blind Side. So I'd encourage you to pick that up if you get a chance. I next want to talk about this article in the Harvard Business Review about building an insights engine. This is written by Stan the Man. He's at Unilever now. Formerly, he was at Coke. I'm not too sure who the other folks are. This article talks very specifically about how big corporations can build insights engines that can create massive growth. Further, there's a very detailed study of organizations that show high performers and low performers in terms of how they're leveraging insights to actually create growth. So I'd encourage you, if you get a minute to read it, it's actually, again, quite an easy read. One of the key tenets in that article is the ability of storytelling, the importance of telling stories. And I hope that many of you on this call are already very good storytellers. Your ability to brush up on that skill set is priceless. I would say it might be one of the most important things you do. I've heard venture capitalists in Silicon Valley who are billionaires because they invested in Facebook and other high technology companies say that the most core skill that they have is their ability to tell stories. So since the beginning of time, the great storytellers have obviously been rewarded. So how can you do that? Well, this is a guy named Paul Smith, and he's a wonderful guy. He's formerly very senior at Procter & Gamble. I think he was one of the most senior research folks in that entire organization. Dr. Young can confirm when we get him on the phone a little bit later. And he had a hobby where he started writing books about storytelling because he learned, and I'll tell you a story really quickly. When he was giving a presentation to Lafley, he spent a long time working on his slide deck, making sure it was perfect, and Lafley, A.G. Lafley, the CEO of Procter & Gamble, the gentleman that said the consumer is boss and built, a whole industry at that company focused around customer insights through the Market Knowledge Center, and Lafley didn't look at the screen. So Paul was looking at Lafley saying, "You can't see my slides," and Lafley looked at him and said, "You know what? Anything that's important is going to come right out of your mouth. I don't need to look at your slides." And Paul had the epiphany that it's all about storytelling. So the good news is all of Paul's knowledge, again, is encapsulated in these books. Further, we're bringing him into our company to train our entire staff about how to tell better stories as they relate to research. If you're interested in that, he's very easy to contact. Just look him up. Next guy I want to talk about is Chris Anderson. Now, I've had the great privilege to be able to go to the TED Main Conference 3 or 4 times and actually sit in the crowd in California, now Vancouver, to actually listen to some of the best storytellers in the world tell their stories in just 18 minutes. And I apologize that the talk we're having today is a little bit longer than 18 minutes. There's a very specific reason why the TED Talks are 18 minutes, and I'm not going to tell you, so I leave some suspense just so you understand when you read the book. This is one of the best books that I've ever read, and it literally tells you how to create a great story from a guy who's coached some of the best storytellers that there ever were. When you go and do a TED Talk, many of those talks are very rough before they get polished by the TED organization through a very specific formula about how you tell a good story, build an idea, and build support for that idea. So I'd encourage you to pick this up. Another idea I want to share with you is the ability to use a service called Upwork. So it's upwork.com, and on there you can find people to make videos out of your research stories. And we just had one made. We took a 100-slide deck, and for the low cost of $350, we had that 100-slide deck turned into a 2-minute animated video that we could then send back to our client organization to allow our internal client to socialize the learning around the new method that we just co-created across her organization. So video is powerful. Pictures speak a lot, but nothing speaks more than an actual video. Now, into the non-conscious, and I know you've all been waiting for Dan Young, and I'm sorry that I've been boring you up until this point, but the good stuff's still to come, I assure you. Thanks for hanging out and waiting. The idea is to incorporate non-conscious. Now, why is that important? Recently, Green Book had an event in Europe called IIEX. They have it every year. It's one of the best events that happens. They do it in Atlanta as well. And at that conference, one of the services that Green Book offers is introductions between suppliers and clients where there's a mutual fit or a mutual interest. And so this year, the percent of meetings by segment, 62% of the clients were wanting to meet with tech companies, companies like Zappy, big data analytics companies, visualization companies. You see the weight is much more there than what I call more traditional service companies, full service companies like Ipsos, like Millward Brown, even like Hotspex. So you can see that the shift to tech is definitely happening. Now here's the more important insight that I want to show you, is that most of these people wanted to see companies that actually offered non-conscious capabilities. So the ability to measure the non-conscious to figure out what's actually happening. So with that, I thought that's why we had Dan Young join us on the call. We're very lucky that after 30 years at Procter & Gamble, Dan, who's hopefully taking himself off mute right now, has joined us, and he's been integral in helping us overhaul our toolkit so that we can measure the non-conscious, because that's what's really important. So Dan, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Fantastic. Dan, just before you get into your talk, I wanted to ask you, and I've asked you this before, but I think it's important everybody else hears it, is why has there been such a big shift to implicit measurement? Why now? What's driving that?
Actually, I think there's 3 things. By the way, hello everyone. This is Dan Young, and they work together. First of all, people became aware of the behavioral science knowledge about what real decision making is like. And so that's the first thing I think that happened, is they became aware that decision making wasn't what they thought it was. And then they started looking at their brands and communications through this new lens, and they began to see the reason why some of what they were doing was very effective and other things they were doing were not effective. And the bottom line in any business is they saw that it was affecting their bottom line, their marketplace performance. So what I'm going to focus on is what is it and why. is what I'm going to focus on today. But to start off, I want to start with a couple examples just to get us warmed up around, okay, when we're talking explicit measures and implicit and conscious and unconscious, how does it play out? What does it really mean? This is published research, public domain, but basically Special K, Kellogg's did a study on Special K, and they found something really interesting, that what people told them explicitly didn't necessarily correspond to what they found out was happening at an unconscious level. So while they talk about health, they found that at an unconscious level, people had concerns around self-image. There was self-image related to this, as well as weight control and social, how they were being perceived by other people. And as a result of this, they went from the left, which is Special K talking directly at, you'll get skinnier, you'll get slimmer. And what they've gone to is they've used implicit cues to communicate to that unconscious mind. One of the problems you see is if something is only functioning really at that unconscious level and I try to talk to it directly, a lot of times people, if they're not thinking about it consciously, will react negatively to that communication. So this is one of the examples. Another interesting case is Coca-Cola. And I don't know if you've got this ad in your particular geography, but at Christmas time, they show this really cool ad with a mother polar bear and her two little cubs, and they're sliding around and all that. And towards somewhere in the video, in the ad, she'll hand each one of them a bottle of Coca-Cola. Now, the interesting thing is, if this was human beings and the mom was handing her little kids a bottle of Coke, your first reaction is, what a crappy mom that is. Well, what happens is that at an implicit level, unconscious level, by using a cartoon type character, it's okay. In other words, I'm doing something to make my kids happy. It's processed. So these both are good examples of why you really need to understand this. And what's been pushing this? So why is this increased interest, as Shane was asking? And a lot of it gets back to the discovery in psychology, and Daniel Kahneman, the little man on the left, he's not that little, is cited as being one of the people that really helped us understand this. Is we have focused on the system 2 processing, this conscious processing, in a lot of what we do, both in market research, marketing, and in the world in general. What they found is the reality is most of your decision making is driven by unconscious processes that people don't necessarily or don't have access to when you talk to them. So this was one of the big drivers behind it. Now, this is something simple I developed, and please be gentle with me. It's not meant to be highly scientific, but it gives you a sense of, so how do those different decision-making processes work? If you look on the left, it's pretty much, the arrows go all directions. It's pretty much an intuitive feel, act kind of thing when you're working from a System 1 processing. Whereas if you're working from System 2, it is more effortful, more sequential in many ways of thinking, deciding, and acting. And so what we have learned is that much of what you're doing is driven by that left process. To give you another piece of information about this, even if somebody is using these conscious systems, System 2, in the background, System 1 is always active. So even in cases where you think somebody's using a highly logical approach, in all likelihood, that's partially driven by these unconscious processes. Now, let me take a familiar example. And this one's important to me because I have a 15, and he told me to correct it, he's 15 and 3/4-year-old stepson. He's not 15 and a half anymore. And he's learning to drive. When you learn to drive, if you can recall, it is very effortful. People tell you exactly what to do. They tell you where to put your hands. They tell you to take your foot off the brake gradually press the accelerator, always look here, look there. It's very much a System 2 process and extremely painful and actually very energy requiring. Now, once you've become a good driver, well, some of us become good drivers. Some would argue I never got there. But once you become an more expert driver, it becomes system one processing. Those decisions are still happening, but they're happening in the unconscious. And as a result of that, you can have conversations, you can listen to the radio, and it's sort of scary when you think about it. You're making very important decisions at autopilot-like type of level. Again, the idea is you move as much to system one as you can, and the reason is that it takes a lot of energy to think. Now, the interesting thing that happens, I'm sorry, the slide locked up on me. There we go, sorry. Is what happens if you're driving and you get into a rainstorm or a snowstorm. The fascinating thing is that you automatically shift from a automatic processing to a very controlled processing again. It all becomes very effortful. Now, this also translates into what you're thinking, into our work in terms of how do we think about the various touch points people have with our brands, products, etc. And whether you're a researcher or it is your brand, you really need to understand what's happening at both a conscious and unconscious level across all those touch points. Again, we're not going to have time today to go through all of it, but let me focus on one thing, the advertising. Couple examples. Michelin, because so much is riding on your tires. Now, I know they've changed their advertising over the years, but juxtaposing these two creates really, really powerful effects at an unconscious level. The safety of something as gentle and sensitive as a baby depends upon the quality of your tire. That is an amazing connection they're making, and I'm sure that it has a great impact on sales, and as well as the brand perception. Another interesting one, and this is near and dear to my heart, since I worked at P&G, but unfortunately I never worked on this project, so this is just based on what I've learned from the media. Now, those of you who are familiar with Dawn and this type of ad, you're going to say, oh, that's really cute. Now, if you've never seen it before, you're going to think this is really weird and abusive to cute little ducks. You're washing a duck in detergent. Well, what they've done is, because of oil spills, they need a way to get the grease and oil off of the ducks and the other animals. And so Dawn is one of the products they use, one of the key products they use to do that. So in this advertising, you're drawing a fantastic relationship between caring, and again, a lot of this is happening outside of awareness, caring and for the environment, caring for these little animals, as well as the powerful ability to get the oil and grease off of them. So that becomes halo for the brand. Now, I'm not going to talk about this one at all, but you can look at this afterwards and see that this is a clothing and accessories company. Huge effects happening at both a conscious and a subconscious level here. And I've got some background in semiotics and all that, cognitive linguistics, and there's a lot happening at both levels in this advertisement. So the bottom line is, we know we need to understand what's happening below the water. The problem is our tools tend to be focused at understanding what people tell us, the system two processing. One of the things that we've been doing at Hotspex, and this is compliment of the behavioral science team at Hotspex, and I think it's a great visual they created, is where are the tools at that we have today, from explicit to implicit, from system one measurement to system two measurement. And as you can see, many of the tools we have, while they are moving, some move in the direction of combination of system one and system two, most of them are really getting at what people have consciously available to them. The big change is on the far right. A lot of companies, and I went to the IIEX conference in Chicago where it was about unconscious processing, there's a lot of people working in that space trying to figure it out. Now, the problem you get into is there's a lot out there, and there's going to be even more that is designed or trying to design against this question of understanding unconscious processes. The problem is that it's not totally clear what is effective and what is not. Rather than tell you all the details, what I decided to do is, what are some 4 basic principles you need to think about? I'll go through this very quickly. First of all, if you're evaluating or developing a method, it should have an established scientific pedigree. There are a lot of tools that have a lot of history coming out of behavioral sciences that have been used for years. And our goal is how do we use those effectively in the context of marketing and market research. So I don't focus too much on totally new to the world tools because I worry, are they really effective? What we focus on are tools that have really well-established pedigrees. A second principle is measures are not, if you're looking at implicit measures, they're not intentional or controlled behaviors or responses. If what you see in the tool is a direct question, is people tell me what you're thinking and feeling, you're not getting at the implicit. And we don't have time to go through tools. Obviously, as follow-up, we'd be glad to talk it. But the tools that are effective at getting at these systems are functioning, are tapping into what's happening at a system one level or unconscious level through indirect measurement. So if it's a direct measurement, in all likelihood, it's not an implicit measurement. This is also important. These tools do require eye protection. In other words, you do need expertise in order to use these tools effectively. And you need the expertise in the design of the research, execution, as well as interpretation and application to your business question. The good news is these are very powerful tools, but they're also can be used inappropriately if the right capabilities aren't there. This is probably the most important slide that I'm going to show because the flavor of the day is something that happens in a lot of companies, and where I worked, this was also the case there. It's not about throw out everything you already know methods-wise. It's about synergy. It's combining these new tools with your traditional tools in order to answer business questions. In other words, you always start with the business question, and then you figure out what's the knowledge and capabilities I need in order to answer that question to impact what's happening in the marketplace and consumer behavior. You don't start with the tool, you start with the question, and if the tool doesn't get around to answering it, it's not useful. And
Dan, that was great. Yeah, Dan, that was great. Look, I think that was a good overview for client-side folks as they're looking at vetting market research vendors. But we're joined by a lot of vendors on this call right now. I know one of your responsibilities at P&G was vetting new vendors that came in. And I just, a question came through. What would be your one key tip that you would give to a new vendor going into an organization in terms of how to position themselves to have a company look at their innovative new method?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the big one is there's two parts to that. I never give one answer to a question, but it's really a multi-part answer. First of all, you do have to have the expertise and experience. And secondly, you need to be able to relate that to what I call a sleep-lost question that business has. When I evaluated suppliers, it wasn't just, is it the biggest supplier? But the question is, do they have the potential? And showing that you have the potential, both in terms of expertise and experience, but also showing you have the potential to really meet a business need that's crucial to that business.
That's great. Awesome, Dan. Thanks very much. More on Dan later. I'll just pick it up right here with a few more tips. One of the things I think is important to understand is thinking about the right clients to partner with and how they want to partner. Different clients will want to pilot things in different ways. And so we're very lucky, and we work with over 100 different organizations at Hotspex, and some are super huge, some are medium, and some are small. I'd say with that exception that it's the really large companies, the P&Gs, the Googles of the world, that actually want to invest in pilots so that they can actually create new methods, because the benefit of them figuring out something that's going to get better insights faster and cheaper is much more amplified than it is with smaller companies. So as you're thinking about approaching your clients about partnerships, I would ask them about how do they pilot, and think about the dynamics between the R&D that you can do together. The clients, they bring money, they bring clear market needs, they bring information, and they can bring process. So that's an important part in creating a successful, innovative new method, whereas suppliers bring consumer science. In our case, it's PhDs in neuroscience and cognitive psychology. We can obviously bring technology, and we're very lucky at Hotspex that we have a full technology development group. But that said, through some of the tools that I've been showing you earlier about Upwork, you can actually get technology built in new and interesting ways a lot more effectively than you previously could. So, think about who these big advertisers are. And, I'll call out P&G specifically because they win this award from Green Book as much as Green Book evaluates through the GRIT survey the world's most innovative suppliers, of which we're happy to have been one in the top 20 for the last 3 years. They also evaluate the most innovative clients. So you can see a list there. I don't have the full list here. I apologize. But those are going to be your best bet in terms of figuring out who's going to actually want to pilot and invest money in something. Switching to Unilever for a second here as an example, as you go in and talk about the ideas that you want to bring, I would pay a lot of attention to the quarterly investor calls. I showed that earlier with the zero-based budgeting amounts from McKinsey. In this stuff, you can read about interesting things that are the focus of the organization up to the CEO level. So you can tell from this slide, that was their quarterly conference call, that Unilever is interested in innovating with speed and agility. So you can basically be sure if your innovative new method offers speed and agility that the people will be interested in it. Talking about Kraft here for a minute. This is a great story. We use this saying often, wouldn't it be great if, and thankfully somebody that we work with at Kraft in North America was able to ask Irene Rosenfeld through an article that we jointly did together, wouldn't it be great if what? And Irene said, it would be great if I could understand my consumer like she was family, like I could have a seat at her breakfast and dinner table so I could see how food was being eaten, where the gaps were, and where opportunities were for my brand to grow. From then, we then proposed a methodology where we would use a phone to do mobile video capture of food and beverage consumption occasions. And right now, we capture about 1 million of these occasions a year. Here's a picture of 50,000 of them together. The data you get is incredible because you actually have a picture, and so people can very accurately tell you what they ate or drank, why they ate or drank it, what the need state was, and then you can go back to the marketers to actually show how the food is being consumed. General Mills, same question. We asked a few insights folks at their head office in Minneapolis, wouldn't it be great if, and they said it'd be great if we could create a methodology to rapidly increase our creative development process. We spent a lot of time figuring out what ads we're going to make and a lot of time going back and forth with the agency, getting them into further and further formats. So we co-created a methodology called the Leading Indicators of Remarkable Advertising that was based on 100 ads first engineered into storyboards so that they could be predictive of how a finished ad was going to perform in market. It wouldn't have been possible for us to do on our own because they had to come to us with all the market data and with the need. And now it's this product that actually saves them millions of dollars in time and fees. Another question, wouldn't it be great if, very happy to be working with a large global agency holdco group where we're helping combine Mad Men with Math Men using behavioral science and cognitive psychology to actually create new methods that blend math and creativity together to help brands grow. My next point, if it's not digital, it's dead. As I was saying before, Google and Facebook have won. There's opportunities to partner with Google and to do things with Google in interesting ways. We're very lucky to be in a couple partnerships with Google right now where we've co-created some methodologies that leverage their technology, and it's great because everyone pays attention. They've got lots of resources, and they're very good about teaching us new stuff. You've got to make sure that your new method saves time and money. If your innovative new method is not time or money saving, you're probably going to be in trouble because the world has changed thanks to our friends at Zappy Store and Google Consumer Surveys where things are just fast and cheap. Here's an example that we did for a client where we were trying to figure out box office sales in Las Vegas where our technology group mocked up that actual user experience as if it would happen online. Again, it took us about a week to build. We could have found a contractor to build this for it, using Upwork. And it was great because we were actually able to simulate it and actually create a more predictive solution for our clients. They could go forward and make better decisions around what new shows to launch. Watson, I can't not talk about Watson. IBM has repositioned themselves as a provider of cognitive computing, which they've labeled Watson. They've got a platform there called Bluemix, which you can go check out. It's just Bluemix in Google, and it'll come up. You'll see a whole platform of tools that are very, very easy to use. And in fact, we worked with someone from Watson in about a week. We stood up a platform that scanned 10 years of Modern Family shows and actually visualized and mapped it for us into one of our emotional maps. Took us about a week to make. It did the scanning in under a second. It was just amazing, the power that Watson's able to offer. So just in closing here, I want to offer anyone that's on the call or anyone that listens to this webinar afterwards, Dan's been at P&G for 30 years, and he had a great time there with diapers and shampoo, razor blades, and all kinds of other interesting consumer packaged goods. One of the highlights of my career is exposing Dan to automotive or theater or Vegas or financial services, and just seeing that the things that he's learned in the consumer packaged goods space are endlessly applicable to other industries. So if you're working on a brand building challenge around packaging, brand growth, advertising, anything, and you'd like a 20-minute fireside chat with Dan, which won't actually be beside a fire, it'll be over Skype. We will try to simulate some fire music. Simply send an email to brandbuilders@hotspex.com, and it would be our great pleasure to offer you that. So in closing, very close to being right on time here, please feel that you are an Insights Innovator. I hope some of the things that you heard here today will inspire you to not do things the way that you've always done them, and that you will start to think a little bit differently about methods that are tried and true and think about how to tweak them, make them familiar with the twist, and start to consider innovation. I'm more than happy, as I mentioned before, to send you a summary of how brands grow. I've just posted something as well on LinkedIn about unicorn employees that I really, really like. So if you add me to your LinkedIn, it'd be great to be connected. I definitely like to stay in touch with all the wonderful people from the Global Insights community. And so, in closing, I'll just leave you with a quote that really stuck with me, and I say it to my team quite often because we are, as I illustrated up front, in a time of massive, massive change. The quote is this: I assure you that if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. Thank you very much for your time. Have a great day, and we hope to be in touch.
The moderator has ended the conference. Goodbye. Thank you for calling.